All right, what's up, everyone? We're back. As you can tell, I sound a little different. I'm slightly far away from the church today. I had to call in, so that's how we're doing it today.
We can mix things up all the time.
That's right. You never know what's going to happen. Next week, it might not even sound like me.
It's not too bad. It gets a little digitized
Yeah,
there when you're talking, but I think it works. I think it's clear from what I can
it's
tell on my end.
it's also nice. Like if we can't always get together, we can do it this way, and that way we still get to talk about the Bible.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because you've got, it's probably, with traffic and red lights and everything, probably a good 20-minute drive,
Yeah, it's
I'd
not bad.
imagine, to get down. Yeah, which most of the time it's not too bad, but it makes it nice. We've got this opportunity to just do it over the phone and tie in that way, and we can still study and stream away. Technology can be an amazing thing sometimes.
That is true. This is very helpful. All right, well, we can just jump into it. We're continuing on in Revelation. We're about halfway through, which I thought the book was a lot longer than what it is
Hmm.
for how much information's in it.
Yeah. And we're not doing that really in-depth verse by verse study, so that kind of
Yeah,
helps it go a little quicker.
yeah. So where we I can't talk. Where we left off last time, we were talking about how they were measuring the church, and then we are now going to go into the two witnesses.
Yes.
And it says that I will appoint my two witnesses, and they will prophesy for 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. So they're going to be slinging prophecy for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, that's that same 42 months.
Yes.
Yeah, that we looked at just, well, last week in that stream, but, just a few verses before that, that same 42 months, that same timeline.
And that seems to be a timeline used frequently in this book.
It is. It is. And, it's just, to me, I think just kind of symbolic of that while the, I don't know, the destruction, the war, this devastation that's going on, at that same time, there's also this um, preaching, really, essentially what it is, this
Yeah.
speaking from these witnesses that is going on as well.
And then it talks about how if anyone tries to harm them, fire comes from their mouths and devours their enemies.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it's not actual fire. They're not fire-breathing dragons.
No, and when you look at these two witnesses, uh, it almost seems like from what it's talking about that I don't really think it's um, two maybe specific people, but it's almost that idea of the how Jesus calls the Old Testament the law and the prophets.
Yes.
Kind of that twofold witness idea. Because he calls it two olive trees, two lampstands. It's uh, the olive trees are providing the oil for the lampstands. The lampstands is providing the light. The Old Testament scriptures were the light that led the Jewish people, and you can't come up against it. You can't harm it. It almost seems like this witness that it's talking about is God's word
Yes.
that cannot be destroyed, and it's always going to be speaking truth.
And that's interesting that you said that because I was going to say the fire that comes from their mouths is the word of God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and it devours their enemies because it completely disarms them. Because we talked about in past streams that it cuts through more than just flesh; it cuts through the spirit,
Right.
so it's able to completely devour you.
Absolutely. There's no lie that can stand up against the truth that is God's word.
So it won't rain.
In some of those things that he goes through, right? Verse 6,
Yes.
the ability to stop the rain, this water turning into blood. You almost seem that, again, you talk about the law and the prophets, you talk about the God's word, and, it was Elijah that was able to stop the rain for, 3.5 years, right?
Yes.
When we talked about Elijah. And it was Moses in those plagues of Egypt that turned it was by God's hand, but he was the instrument that God was using to turn water into blood. And so again, you kind of see that idea of the law and the prophets, God's word, through kind of that descriptive terminology that's used here in verse 6.
And because you brought that up, it's also very interesting how the two witnesses kind of mirror what Jesus went through. Because it says that when they're finished with their testimony, the beast comes up out of the abyss and attacks them and kills them.
Mm-hmm.
And then their bodies lie in the public square because nobody wants to bury them.
Yeah.
And then 3.5 days later, they come back to life and then they go up to heaven.
Isn't that interesting?
Yes.
It seems like a very similar parallel to what happened with Jesus, right?
Yeah.
Everybody wanted to blot it out, and so sin, Satan, wickedness within the hearts of mankind to crucify Jesus on the cross. And just like we saw throughout the Gospels, and even in that picture of Jonah being in the belly of the whale for 3 days and 3 nights, the same kind of idea here. And then when you get into the next section of chapter 11, these witnesses, just like Jesus and just like Jonah, that idea of being resurrected, coming to life again.
Yeah.
And then ascending to heaven. Not so much Jonah, but Jesus.
So then there was an earthquake, and it killed 7,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty much the end. Well, that's the end of that section of chapter 11. Then we get to the seventh trumpet, which it's amazing that we're still in the trumpets.
Yes. Yeah, kind of like we said before, they're getting longer and more detailed
Yes.
within these trumpets from the first one that we began in.
So the seventh trumpet is sounded, and there was a praising of God from the 24 elders. And then it says, then God's temple in heaven was opened, and within his temple he was seen. No, within his temple was seen the ark of his covenant. And there came flashes of lightning, rumblings, pearls of thunder, an earthquake, and a severe hailstorm. So just from opening heaven, I guess it would be kind of spectacular to see that happen.
Oh, absolutely. And, is this, when I look at chapter 11, it almost seems to me like the beginning of the church, all right? If you think about it this way, it almost seems like John, through these visions, is telling the people as he's writing to them that this is how things started, right? You have Jesus, his story as he's on the earth. He is the witness to mankind. All right, there was nothing they could do to him unless what he allowed them to do. The crucifixion, the death, the resurrection, and then what happens after his ascension up to heaven. You have the power of God coming in full force with the rise of Christianity. You know, with how they were going throughout all of this Mediterranean area, right, of Israel, and then in Paul's journeys, to Rome, where the people of the day, even back in the beginning of the book of Acts, they said, these men, speaking of the apostles, have turned the world upside down. And just the change and the bringing down of Judaism, the bringing down of idol worship, polytheism. And I look at this end of chapter 11, and it almost seems like that would be a very figurative way to put it. How the heavens are opening up, right? God's church, it was just measured. God's church in its fullness is coming, and the destruction of sin and the destruction of the wicked practices that are going on in the world being trampled down, because his temple is seen, because God is now in the Christian age with us. That's just my take on that chapter.
I think that was a good take.
I don't know about that, but
I have nothing to add. There needs to be nothing added. So, moving on to chapter 12, it gets interesting. And it says, a sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. She was pregnant, about to give birth, and then an enormous red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on its heads was standing before the woman to devour the baby once she gave birth. That didn't happen. Once she gave birth, an angel flew down and took the baby up to heaven, and she was given a place in the woods where she could be taken care of. I say woods, it says wilderness. I think of woods when I hear wilderness.
Okay.
We've been through this.
Yes, we have.
And she's taken care of there for those 42 months. Now, I want to stop there because we hit a lot of things that might be a little confusing. Because it certainly was for me.
Okay.
Just all of the alliteration. She was clothed with the sun, the moon under her feet, and a crown over her head. What does that even mean?
What does that mean? And we've seen that idea before, right?
Yes.
Of the sun, the moon, the stars, and that was all kind of those pictures before of powerful nations that are going to be brought down. And so does that show, her power that she has? She's clothed with the sun, the moon under her feet, the stars on her head. It almost seems like the exact same kind of wording there. Just somebody who is powerful.
Yes.
Ability to rule.
See, I was taking it as they were trying to draw a parallel with Mary.
And it very could well be.
Because of the dragon, obviously Satan.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt there.
It says it's Satan in the next paragraphs. And so the way I took it was that she was giving birth to Jesus, and Satan was standing there trying to devour Jesus because he was.
And he couldn't do it.
Yes.
No matter how much he tried, he couldn't do it.
And the angel came down and took the baby up to heaven to keep him protected. So it kind of, to me, reminded me of that story and of those events that took place.
Hmm. And the ultimate, again, it's kind of go back to that same theme of the same moon and the stars. You know, that victory, because what happened to the sun, moon, and stars before? They crashed. All right.
Yeah.
And that was the downfall of those nations. But here, that didn't happen. There was victorious in that. The baby was able to be born. Herod, right, wasn't
Yes.
able to kill Jesus like he had wanted to, this Messiah, right? She
Yes.
fled. She was protected. Satan tried, and I think that could almost be a twofold kind of idea with that dragon. Is that Satan's trying to kill uh, baby Jesus and was unsuccessful? Satan trying to kill, uh, I don't know how I want to put it, adult Jesus, you know, with the
Yeah.
crucifixion on the cross. And even though he was able to kill his physical body, he resurrected. So there again, unsuccessful. That was all of God's plan, anyhow, from the beginning. And so he wasn't able to accomplish either of the times that he had tried to do that.
It is very interesting how the way it's written, you can get various interpretations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But then I also think if you were living in the time when it was written and reading it then, you would probably all have the same interpretation.
Yeah.
Not so much now because we're so far removed from that time.
But it's just, I think, again, like chapter 11, just interesting how it could easily parallel the story of the gospel.
Yes.
All written in one book. And it makes sense, right? With, a lot of people have different interpretations of Revelation. We kind of opened the study with it, with that idea of, whether it's things that are far reaching into our time and time to yet to come, or if it's something a little more recent to the people that John was writing to. And of course, that's kind of my understanding of the book of Revelation, was that John was writing these things to the people of that day because of things that are going to happen very shortly. And that's the kind of wording that you see at the very beginning of the first chapter there. That these things are shortly to come to pass, right?
Yeah.
And so when I think about that, and I think of how John is recording these things that seem to be speaking of in a very figurative way of the gospel and what happened, that he's reminding them of, hey, this is what happened, right? That, there was this, God's word, right, was trying to be wiped out, yet couldn't be, right? Jesus tried to be killed. People tried to murder Jesus, yet couldn't. Victory still continued. The church, God's people, exploded and multiplied of people coming to the church. All in a way, the whole purpose, in my mind, of the book of Revelation is to give encouragement to the Christians who are going through persecutions, who think that Christianity is going to be wiped out and foolish to follow it. And the reminder of, hey, we persevered before, we can persevere now, and without a doubt, we're going to persevere at the end because God is on our side.
Yeah. And moving on into chapter 12 more, says that a war broke out in heaven between Michael and his angels and the dragon and the dragon's angels. The dragon and their angels weren't strong enough, so they lost their place in heaven, and the dragon was hurled down. That ancient serpent called the devil or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He was hurled to the earth, and his angels with him. And I think, what was it, like over a year ago, I brought up that idea of the earth was made for a place for Satan. And I think we talked about how it says you could assume that from this passage in Revelation.
Yeah. I mean, the scripture tells us that Satan is the prince of the power of the air, that he is the ruler of this age, you know. But what happened, again, you know, we're taking this theme that Revelation, you know, this part that we're in is kind of retelling the gospel. What happened when Jesus died on the cross and then resurrected 3 days later? He took all of Satan's power away.
Yeah.
Satan thought he was winning, right? By killing the Messiah. He thought, oh, I finally got it. But in doing so, his own power was stripped away from him, that he didn't have the effect that he can have anymore, because through Christ and his sacrifice, we have complete forgiveness of sin through that grace and mercy that God provides. And so, what I look at this, what you had just read, is that now that battle of the battle of sin, right, that we continually fight against, that battle continues to go on, right? Satan's power is wiped off the face of the earth, but his influence is still around, right? The way that he tries to manipulate us and wow us with temptation for us to give over to sin, but he can't snatch us out of God's hand. We can willingly walk away, but he can't snatch us out of his hand. And but now that battle turns from Satan's power in the earth to really just kind of a struggle within our own heart with sin and desire. And of course, James talks about that in James chapter 1, about where sin and temptation come from.
So the next passage says, when the dragon saw that he'd been hurled to the earth, he decided to pursue the woman who gave birth to the child. And she was given 2 wings of a great eagle, so that she might fly to the place prepared for her in the wilderness. And she would get taken there for a time, times, and half a time, out of the serpent's reach. It's such a weird way to state a long time.
Right? Yes. Yes. And
I guess,
good.
did they not have what a long time meant back then? So they did time, times, and half a time to denote.
Times and a half times. Yeah. And it's just, you know, it goes with the whole theme of the book. You know, this very descriptive, figurative language. It's going to go on for a long time, right? That would be a little easier to say. However, not as wonderful.
Nothing's easy in Revelation, so why do that?
Right? Yeah.
Make it all difficult.
Mm-hmm. But, you know, the idea, she was able to escape, right?
Yes.
She was able to escape the persecution. Now, did the church prevail through the persecution that happened in the 1st and 2nd centuries? It's still here, right?
Yeah.
No matter whatever nation it was that came up against it, whether it was Rome of the time, or whether, you know, maybe even more modern day examples of trying to burn the Bible and wipe it out of existence to wipe out Christianity. You know, there's a war going on now with that whole militant atheism that you and I have been talking about on these shows for a while. The idea is to wipe Christianity off the face of the earth, so there's no talk about it anymore, and Christianity still continues to go on. It still perseveres through all that persecution, and I believe that only because of God's providence, keeping those things going and protecting it and allowing it to survive through all those things, just as God protected, throughout this story of Revelation, protected this woman in her fleeing from Satan.
So then, the dragon, as he was chasing her, he decided to spew water like a river from his mouth to overtake the woman, but the earth helped the woman by opening its mouth and swallowing the river. And so the dragon was very angry and decided to wage war against the offspring of the woman, which those people are described as those who keep God's commandments, commands, and hold fast their testimony about Jesus.
All right.
And I think that was kind of why I felt like this was a story about Mary.
Mm-hmm. And it could be, but you see also in there that more people than just Mary too, right? I mean, it's trying to kind of specifically, as he's talking through the story, attacking that woman, but also her offspring. And so, who are her offspring?
Those who keep God's commands.
Yeah. So all of Christians, individual Christians, Christianity at large, so he moves from just trying to attack her to attacking everybody else. And of course, that doesn't work either.
No. You gotta admire the persistence, though.
If Satan's anything, he is persistent.
Yes.
Right? I mean, I don't think there's a single story throughout the Bible that shows us that Satan isn't persistent. And, we talked about Job, that whole persistence of afflicting Job. You look at Satan and his temptations of Jesus in the wilderness for those 3 times. I mean, he didn't give up on the first time when Jesus says, nope, right?
Yeah.
And he still tried and tried and tried to persuade Jesus not to be obedient to God.
So after that, in chapter 13, the dragon stood by the sea, and John said he sees a beast coming out of the sea. It had 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 crowns on each horn, and on each head a blasphemous name. The beast I saw resembled a leopard, but had feet like those of a bear and a mouth like that of a lion. I always like to read the descriptions of these things.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's definitely a meaning behind it. Obviously, it didn't look like a leopard with the feet of a bear and the mouth of a lion.
Right. I think it's, again, just like we saw before, the reason why those animals are used to describe has to deal with their abilities, right? The leopard, fast, right? Vicious, destructive. The bear, powerful. And same thing with the lion. The mouth of a lion, right? Just think about the size of a lion's mouth and its ability to clamp down and to shred anything that it wants to. So, again, this whole picture of the ability to swiftly and quickly destroy things. And where did the power come from for this beast? I don't know if you read that yet.
Dragon.
Yeah, it came from the dragon. So it came
Dragon
from
Gate.
Satan, right?
Yes. What I found interesting in this chapter is verse 3, where it says, "One of the heads of the beast seemed to have a fatal wound, but the fatal wound had been healed."
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's interesting because it's, to me, it seems like Satan is trying to mimic Jesus. Like he's trying to show people, look at how much power this beast out of the sea has, and he also had a fatal wound, and I healed it.
That's interesting. I never thought of that before.
And the reason I think that too,
Trying to kind of peacock around, right? Look at
yeah,
me. Look what I can do. Yeah.
and I think why I got to that conclusion was in verse 4. It says people worship the dragon because he had given authority to the beast.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like how people worship Jesus because God gave authority to Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And Jesus also had a fatal wound and rose from the dead. It's like Satan is, again, lying and trying to deceive us by showing this beast that seemed like it had a fatal wound, but we don't know that. And I think that's the difference. People saw Jesus die and get buried.
Yeah.
And walking around when he should be dead.
Right. Yeah.
And
People witnessed him over
yeah,
500 at once, and yeah.
and nobody witnessed any of that from this beast. They just see, oh, it looks like it should be fatal.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
And to move on, they were.
Well, I'm gonna sit there for just a second, if you don't mind. This beast, right, is a helper. I don't know if I want to call it a helper of the dragon, right?
Yeah.
So a helper of the dragon is Satan, and so these are some of I use this term all the time. I think probably because the movie, but minions, right? These are going to be some people that Satan is going to use to try to do his purpose, which is to wipe out Christ and Christianity.
Yes.
Right? And I look at verses 11 and 12, and it seems, right, if we look at those things, that it can parallel with the story of Jesus, right? His birth, his death, his resurrection, the beginning of and the growth of the church. Satan tried to destroy those things. He tried to stop those things. He was unable to do so. And so what's he going to use next, right? It seems, at least to me, that with this beast, with its heads, that Satan is now going to use governmental powers to try to stop the growth of the church. And that these different heads possibly are different kings of that served on the Roman Empire to try to stop Christianity. And so that's a possibility that who this beast is and who the heads are these kings of the Roman Empire trying to put an end to Christianity.
That's definitely a way to think about it. I didn't think about it that way.
Mm-hmm.
But now that you bring that up, it does seem true with what's being written and what was going on in the time.
And just through these things, it just makes some very figurative connections, like verses 5 and 6, talking about openly blaspheming God in his temple and the place where it dwells. And you look back through history and see this how some of these kings, the emperors of Rome, did these things, and how like Nero, stood in the temple and God's house, right, and claimed himself to be God, and he was, one of the worst persecutors of the church, and even burned down Rome because of his, I don't know, insanity throughout this season. So you see these descriptions given to him, and you look at some of the history, and it seems to really correlate a lot with those rulers of the time.
So in 13, like you said, it says that it was given power to wage war against God's holy people and to conquer them, which they did, and was given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation. And I like how it ends the chapter with this calls for patient endurance and faithfulness on the part of God's people.
Mm-hmm.
How many times are we told that?
Are you at the end of 13?
Well, in the middle.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Right the end of that paragraph. Okay.
I see the new title and then I think it's the end, and it's never the end.
Gotcha. I was like, wait a minute, where are you at? Yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, that's time and time again, right? To have patience, to have that idea of being vigilant, right?
Yeah.
To persevere through all these things time and time again.
And we're told it rains on the just and unjust.
Yep, it does.
So we have to have that patient endurance and faithfulness all the time until we go home, which is heaven.
Yeah.
Anyone wondered?
And no matter how bad things are, that understanding that we can have that patience and endurance because God is with us through it all.
Yes.
It might not be fun going through. It might not be fun going through this persecution and horrible times, but God's with us through it.
So then there's another beast, and this beast comes out of the earth. And it had two horns like a lamb, but it spoke like a dragon. And I think this is just another alliteration that Satan is trying to replicate Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
First, you have the beast out of the sea that had that fatal wound, and it's healed, and now you have the beast out of the earth that is a lamb, but speaks like a dragon. And I think trying to hold on to that history that we know happened, the lamb that speaks like a dragon, I think we've always been warned about these, the wolves in sheep's clothing.
Yeah.
And so I don't see this as any different. This is kind of like the false teachers and the false prophets and those people that say things that seem like are biblical but are completely opposite.
Mm-hmm.
And it will ensnare people who don't know biblical truth.
Yes.
And that's why it's important for every person to be in the Bible all the time, because then you will be able to discern from biblical truth and untruth and be able to warn people against it.
They look like somebody who is helpful, kind, yes, godly, but underneath, right, they're that ravenous wolf. Well, here, looks like somebody who is kind and sweet and loving and caring, but it's that beast that's going to attempt to destroy you. It's Satan, the dragon, right? So got to be careful on the outward appearances. You got to hear what they're saying and what they're teaching, because it can so easily lead you astray.
So this second beast out of the earth exercised all the authority of the first beast on its behalf and made the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, and the first beast being the beast that had the wound, which is now healed. This second beast also performed great signs, even casting fire to come down from heaven to the earth in full view of the people. And because of these signs, it was given power to perform on the behalf of the first beast. It deceived the inhabitants of the earth, which we were just talking about how that can happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And with that deception, it ordered the people of the earth to set up an image in honor of the beast who was wounded by a sword and yet lived. The second beast was given power to give breath to the image of the first beast so that the image could speak and cause all who refused to worship the image to be killed. A lot of beasts. And I think for me, I got a little confused because it was talking about the first beast, which I thought was the dragon. And it isn't. So I had to keep telling myself that the first beast is the beast out of the sea, not the dragon.
Hmm.
Which it does kind of clarify with you, but when you see the first, well, when I saw the first beast, I just automatically thought of the dragon.
Yeah. And at the end, it is, because it's being controlled, powered by the dragon. So he's just, the beasts are just the puppets for the dragon to use. And he's going to use anybody and everybody that he can. And the people are tricked, mesmerized by this beast to the point that they're going to start trusting in and start worshiping.
Yes. Or you'll be killed.
Right.
Which probably is a good thing.
So again, you look back at historic Rome. To be a Christian, it wasn't a safe place to be.
No.
To be killed. And really that kind of was prevalent all the way up and through until Constantine was converted. Right? Was it Constantine, right? Yeah. And
my Roman history.
Yeah. I said Constantine, and I'm starting to think of that stupid, crazy movie of
Keanu Reeves.
Yeah, and that had nothing to do with Constantine.
No, that's a Marvel hero.
Yeah, and so I'm thinking that's right, and where he was all for Christianity. And
Zenedine says you're right, so you're
okay.
good.
Thank you. And he almost turned the tables opposite, where you're gonna follow Christianity or you're gonna be destroyed almost, and so people were more accepting of Christianity instead of being these empires who were completely against it. They wanted to hold to that polytheistic religion that had been so prevalent with Greek and Rome, with their multitudes of gods, and anybody else we don't want to have anything to deal with.
Zenedine said he made Christianity tolerable.
I think that's a good way to put that. Yes. His version of Christianity, which I will, yeah. He had his own thought on what it was, but
so it then said this second beast forced all the people to receive a mark on their right hands or on their foreheads, so that they could not buy or sell unless they had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of its name.
Mm-hmm.
And to end out the chapter, it says, "This calls for wisdom. Let the person who has insight calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. That number is 666."
All right.
There it is.
There it is.
And we're going to end it here.
All right. Now, within historic Rome, there's no recording of a specific tattoo, if you will, that was put on the people, whether you were this group or this group, right?
Yes.
But can you not tell, even in our day and age, the ethnicity of people? Perhaps from dress and certain attire, certain features of who might be of a different religion than you.
Possibly.
Possibly. You think about in our day and age that you can pretty well determine who is Muslim and who is not. Right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you can't tell who's Christian and who's not Christian. Sometimes people wear, the cross as a necklace or so, and sometimes you can tell things that way. But there's visible differences, and through here it seems like if you're not a follower of the beast, this again, I think this idea, historically thinking, if we can't tell that you're a Roman and you're a pagan Roman, that you are a worshiper of these Roman gods, that you are a different person, you are a Christian, we don't even want to deal with you, right?
Yeah.
We're not going to let you to buy. We're not going to let you sell. We're not going to let you do anything because we don't like you, right?
Yeah.
Same idea as somebody who might come into a business wearing a turban, we don't want anything to do with you. You're wearing, I can't remember what those full body coverings that some of the Muslim women might wear. And so because you are different than us, we don't want anything to do with you at all. And so there's this, you're one or the other. You're either one of us or one of them. And we're going to be able to tell who you are through that. And then you get to this number 666 and, the mark of the beast. And there's so many ideas of what the mark of the beast is or what it was. And for what most people think it is, that you've got this marking, this scar, this tattoo that you are one of Satan's people. Today, people think that it's the injections of like chipping, like they chip dogs, microchipping.
Okay.
That's going to be the new mark of the beast because everybody's going to have this chip in them. And John says, take a minute, right? If you're wise and you think about it, the number of this beast, right, it's not the followers of the beast, but the number of this beast is a number of a man. So it's somebody, right?
Yeah.
And if you look at this number, 666, and you are wise and you think about it, it's going to lead you to a person. Well, really kind of interesting. If you go through, it's kind of a cryptogram where numbers stand for letters, that kind of idea. When you do that, oddly enough, you come up with the name Neron. And who has a name that we've already talked about that sounds like Neron?
I have no idea.
How about Nero Caesar?
I wonder.
I wonder. And so that kind of makes sense. Hey, watch out, because when all these horrible things are going on, right? and persecution is at the highest. And when destruction is going to happen, this is the dude, this is the man that is in power of the time. And it just really kind of adds up together with when we look at the history of these things going on, and with this um, book. I'm going to see if I can't.
Yeah, Zed, he wasn't the greatest person alive. So I think that's a good time to, or yeah, place to end it. Until next week.
I'm going to try to find. I've got uh, a graphic that I'll see if we can't maybe throw in for next week on that kind of depictogram of Nero and where the 666 kind of ties in together. I'm sure if you Google it, if you guys are listening,
Yeah.
can hop on air and see that as well. But I don't know if I can grab it up quick enough here.
So thank you everyone for being here. Thank you Twitch, and thank you YouTube for taking time out of your busy day for listening and doing this with us. Thank you, Dave.
Hey, I'm glad we were able to get together and do this.
And I will be streaming literally right after we end this. So if you want to hang out, you can.
Sweet.
I'll be back. And thank you as always. God bless, and I'll see you.
We'll see you guys.